Welcome to User Access Troubleshooting, Agentforce to the rescue. Now, we've had various interviews and surveys, and you've told us that troubleshooting user access is quite challenging. It can be also time-consuming. So in this session, we want to introduce an agent for setup that's going to help boost your productivity, and I also want to walk through various resources so that you know how to do things via the UI or the API. Salesforce is a publicly traded company. Please make all purchasing decisions on currently available product and not comments on the roadmap. My name is Larry Tung, and I'm very interested in understanding how we can make user access easier to use so that we can ensure you protect your data in your org. We're going to start off with going through Agent for Setup, and this agent is included if you purchase any of our other agents. I also want to walk through various UI and API options as you're going through various user access challenges. And we're going to focus on a couple. Let's say you get a ticket and you have a user, Sean. Sean's saying, hey, I can't access this specific Acme account record. What's going on? And then there may be other scenarios. Let's say you have Linda, and she's trying to access the debug logs. She's wondering, hey, it's not there. What's going on? So what user permission is missing? And then maybe you're troubleshooting and you're wondering, why isn't the Apex class, or maybe it's a flow, why isn't that running for your user? And that could be based on the setup entity access. So we're going to go through some of these challenges. And some of the questions that you may then have is, when should I use the UI versus the API or the agent? With the UI, I usually think about, well, it's one specific thing you're trying to focus on. Versus the API, you're trying to pull multiple users, maybe a lot of other metadata, or you're trying to export. And then where's the agent come in? Now, this is just the beginning. The agent currently helps with understanding a single user's object access, or the user permissions assigned to a specific user, or finding a specific user permission. But it's going to be able to do more, so we'll get to that. So you want to see Agent for Setup in action? Yeah? All right, let's take a look. Let's take a look at this demo. And normally, I'm at a specific user. So here we have Linda. She's telling me some things aren't working. So I'm going to go to the user access summary, typically, and here I can see all the various access that's been configured to grant her access. The user permissions, object permissions, and so forth. And so, yes, you can do this. You can see the access. But wouldn't it be nice so that you don't necessarily need to know where to click in setup, and instead be able to talk to an agent? And this is where Agent for Setup comes in, because as long as you're in setup, you can start asking Agent for Setup questions. And so in this scenario, I want to know whether Linda has access to contacts. And I want to understand what her access is and how she got that access. So let's wait. So the agent's thinking, it's doing some analysis based on a question you asked. And here you have, Linda has read access, and we also have the permission set ID. In the future, you'll be able to click into that and see the specific permission set. So this is, like I said, just the beginning. And, maybe you're thinking, yeah, it's just one user. So I think what we really need to do is improve this agent. It should really be able to compare two users. And we've heard that also on the Ideas Exchange. Often, you're telling us, let's compare two users. So let's try that. We got Linda and Sean. So usually one user has a specific job role, and you're thinking the other user should be able to do the same thing. So let's try that with Linda and Sean, and specifically on the account this time. And also, let's tell the agent, tell me what the differences are. So instead of you having to manually compare, the agent can now grab that access that's based in your org, and you can see it provides the access that Linda has, Sean has, and then it highlights the differences, and then it will also tell you how both of these users got their access. So this is a peek into object access, and there may be also questions about user permissions. In some orgs, you may have hundreds, if not 1,000 user permissions, depending on what you have installed in your org. And sometimes it's like, well, how do you know which user permission you should grant? Usually I then have to go to the permission set page. I look at all the various permissions that are possible and read the description and try to figure it out. But now we can ask the agent. So let's ask in natural language, what permission lets me download the results of a report? And so now it's looking in your org, trying to figure this out. And the agent also should be able to tell me which users have this specific permission when you're focused on 1 or 2 users, just like we did in object access. So here we see, or we learned that export reports is that user permission you need. But let's also try and compare again. Let's take a look at Linda and Sean and try to understand, can they export report results? And now the agent's going to think, it's going to query your org, and then it's going to also tell me what access is granting that access. So it does some research, and there we go. Linda does not have the permission, Sean does, and it's based on the profile that Sean has. So that's a peek at the user access features that are now available for the agent for setup. And I want to briefly mention roadmap, because you're wondering, hey, you should be able to do more, right? So that's what we're working on. And right now, you saw Spring 25. In March, what we have is object and user permissions for specific user, and being able to identify the user permission you need. Hopefully in the summer, we're planning to get field permissions, so you can ask questions like, well, there's an address field on the contact, and Sean can't edit, so what's Sean's access? Why is, what's giving Sean that access, or comparing that with Linda and so forth. And then in winter 26, which is October this year, we're hoping to have record access. I put months here just because sometimes we might keep making enhancements as we go. So we won't be completely fixed to the major release schedule, but that's in general what we're thinking about. And I'm going a bit conservative because I know you're probably wondering, hey, you're just being able to tell me what's in my org. What about edit and other things, right? So we have that top of mind too. Now, you might be telling me, well, I don't have an agent in my org yet, so I still need to troubleshoot. So what do? And we also have various features here. Many of you probably have seen, but if you haven't seen, I highly encourage you trying these out. Various summary pages. So we added one for user access summary, which you saw. Public group access summary. We also have permission set group summaries, and these have been, we keep trying to iterate based on your feedback. One of my favorites was this access granted by. This was available in winter 25, so last October, and it's a row level action, and it tells you the reason why someone has the access that they do. Another favorite of mine, if you haven't seen, is object access within the object manager. So this is one place where you can see permission sets, permission set groups, and profiles giving the access for a specific object. And what's cool about this is coming in summer, you'll be able to edit. Now, this one I think is a good one, but many people tell me, what? I didn't even know about that. So that's why I'm sharing this. If you're looking at a specific record in Lightning Experience, here you can see the access that people have for a specific record. So I'm looking at the TagCat account, and I want to understand which users have access to it. And from that sharing hierarchy action, you can see the list of users, and then you're probably wondering, well, how did that user get that access? It's really important, especially if you have 2 users, one user cannot, but the other can, and they're supposed to have the same access. So let's drill into the details. And in this scenario, John, he gets access based on a sharing rule based on his role. So you'll see the reasons for that user's access. Oh, surprise. Okay. I cannot read any of what I'm showing you in this slide, and that's sometimes how I feel about SOQL. I kind of have to trust my engineers that this SOQL actually works, or the documentation. And sometimes I do understand a little bit just because, like, oh, okay, I recognize this word. And so that's why I want to put in a little warning as we're going into some slides, and you might kind of look at it and go, ooh, right? Like, that's how I sometimes feel, and then I have to try it out. So since this session is also being available online, or maybe you're watching on the recording, you can try it out at home. So before we get into the SOQL, there's a key secret I gotta let you in on if you haven't seen our documentation. And maybe it's, you wouldn't expect, but the permissions on a profile are stored in a permission set. But that permission set you don't see in the UI. It's just there. And similarly, the permission set group, it's made out of multiple permission sets. Let's say you put 10 permission sets in a permission set group, and maybe you have muting on that permission set group as well. So we take all of that access and apply the muting and place that in a single permission set. And if you think about it, it makes runtime access checks a lot easier for us, because then we know, okay, this permission set group, all the permissions are in a single permission set. It also makes troubleshooting or exporting a bit easier, because now when you query via SOQL, then the permission sets that are really the permissions on a profile or permission set group are in a permission set. And then the documentation explains it a bit differently. It says a permission set can be owned by a profile or permission set group. So now we're getting into some SOQL. The slides will be available in the TDX portal if you're an attendee. And this is an example where if you have the profile ID or permission set group ID, you can then get the permission set. And then when you're querying the permission set, you get various details, like is it giving read access, edit access, and so forth. So I want to walk you through some of the examples here. We're going to go quick just based on time, but the first scenario is me looking at the field permissions, or what we call field level security. When you're troubleshooting, you might focus on a specific field, or maybe you want all of the fields on that specific object. I'm giving you an example where I'm looking for edit access. So I want to know which permission sets are giving me edit access for this specific field. And when you're troubleshooting, you get that ticket, you're usually focused on one user. So in that point, you're looking at the permission set assignments for that user. So that second query introduces that, what you can do there. And this example about field permissions it's very similar also for object permissions, the user permissions, and also set up entity access. So I want to walk you through a bit on the field permissions. I added a row above the output, the CSV that I'm showing you on the screen, just so you see, well, we have the field names, we have the field permissions, since we're querying the field permissions, and then we have the permission set that is granting that access, along with what that access is, what object, and so forth. So this output is very similar, like I said, on these other tables as well. And so with the time remaining, I want to focus on a few gotchas. Sometimes people say, wait, how come I'm at the UI and some of the fields are grayed out when I'm talking about field permissions? And that's because either it's a system field or it may be a field that you've marked required. So if you're trying to find field permissions for these type of fields, what happens is because you made it required or so forth, you can't actually assign field permissions. It's based on the object permissions for that user. So with user permissions, the gotcha is that you actually need to know the user permission API name. So when audit says, hey, I want to give me that list of all users who have customized application, or view all data, what I had to do in the API is I first had to write permissions followed by the API name. So here, customized application. And that's in some sense helps if you have an agent, because it will kind of figure out what the right query is. But regardless, this example shows you me pulling a specific user. But if I got rid of that where clause, you could pull all users, or you could replace it with just the users you care about. So that's where that assignee ID with the in clause with the comma separated list of the user IDs. And again, you can apply this same concept on the other object permissions and so forth. Now, setup entity access, there's roughly about a dozen setup entities. Think about Apex, Flow, connected apps. There's a whole bunch of them, right? There's a dozen. And so these queries, again, they look very similar to the field permissions I showed you earlier. Now, I also want to show you the user record access API. This one is a bit different. It's not the same as the sharing hierarchy lightning action in the sense that it just tells you the access for a user and a bunch of records, right? So you can query at most 200 at one time. Now, this roadmap slide actually covers a lot more of what we're doing in user access. Because you're thinking, oh, okay, maybe I'll use the agent if I have an agent in my org, but this brings me to what's next, right? And that is, there are other sessions I want to highlight. I covered user access for agent for setup, and there's another session that's just devoted to Agentforce agent for setup, because user access is one component of many things you want to do in setup, and we're going to have more teams in the future continue to build additional topics and actions that this agent will then be able to help you with. So for those of you at TDX, 2 sessions tomorrow. Future user management, same thing. You want to know, what are we doing within setup? And the various ways we're going to just help you manage user access. So again, check that session out. And both of these sessions are available later on Salesforce Plus as well, on demand. And then finally, for those of you in the room, we also have a booth. You can visit us at the Platform Park. We have some engineers and other UX and other folks staffing it, so bring your questions or feedback. Our engineers love to hear from you guys directly. Now, I want to thank you all for coming, and also for continuously giving us feedback so we can really help make your jobs easier. And what I want to also ask as a favor, feedback is a gift. Hopefully you'll win a $5 gift card from Starbucks as well. I do read through all of your survey feedback. I'm not joking about that, so please, QR code here, fill in the feedback form for this session. And then I also have thank you. I'll wait for you to take a picture. But I also have another slide in case you didn't get it. On the left is, for those of you who are watching online, I have a Google form available so you can give me some feedback. But again, for the folks in the room, the same QR code as the prior slide. I've also put a QR code for just various user access resources. So I went through various slides relatively quickly. If you're looking for what are the trailheads I would recommend, various blog posts I would recommend, and so forth, that's where you should go. And I wish I could have gone through all of the slides, so if you're at TDX, the slides will be available for download. There's a bunch of others I would have went through just based on time, but it's basically just the various queries that you could run if you need to export various information from your users. So thank you again for coming.